I would like to invite Max. Max was an exchange student with us. I remember, discussing a few issues, including, the history of urban anthropology with him. Max was here he came to the department as an exchange student in 2018, January. And Max took 3 papers. He studied anthropology of development, tribal India, and urban anthropology.
Yeah, thank you so much. I've prepared a presentation, so I'm trying to share my screen now. Very good. Thank you so much. Thank you for your kind introduction, and thank you all also for having me. I think in times like this social academical exchange, however you want to call it, is a special blessing. So thanks again for organizing. And as you saw probably on the poster, my topic has seemingly to do only a little with COVID-19, but of course there is no way around the current situation of the pandemic. So I'm going to talk about affective spaces in the city. I will take a special example on the Görlitzer Park, which I will introduce to you later in the presentation. So just let me begin. So my personal approach actually started in Delhi, where I took the paper, like Sarah said, in urban anthropology, which with this always really interesting part. And you can see here on the left side, I wrote about the heterotopia in the urban anthropology, in example of Kamlanero Ridge, which was like the first step I took to urban anthropology. And then later in my studies here back in Germany, I tried to orientate myself in the field of anthropology of emotions. And that's I need to translate it probably because it's in German. It's fear of violence in the Berlin metro system, which is a huge topic, but not that much the actual fear, but a subjective feeling of fear, which you always can, I don't know, have riding the subway at night or something. So let me introduce the Görlitzer Park really shortly. You can see here on the right-hand side a picture of the Görlitzer Park in the background, and at the foreground you can see a beer bottle, actually with the beer called Görli. That is a really, I don't know, a symbol of how engaged the people are with the park, how they're identifying with the park that has a long history. So on the left hand, you can see from the bird's perspective the park. It is in Berlin-Kreuzberg, that is a pretty alternative quarter of the city. Also, also a little bit of a problem quarter because they have to fight gentrification. There are a lot of micro processes going on that make the value of this quarter go up so hard that no one can live there anymore because the costs of renting flats are so high. So the park itself is really small. It's only like 140,000 square meters. That's not too big for a Berlin city park. So you probably would ask why is it so interesting to get to know this park or to understand what's so effective about it. But I will come to that later. On the right hand side you can see like some pictures, but don't mind them that much. The colors are not that vibrant because it was in a November month in Berlin, and Berlin is around this time pretty gray, except the orange bin you can see on the right hand side in the bottom corner. So here I made a little timeline with pictures to explain to you quite shortly how the Görlitzer Park was introduced to Berlin. Is because on the left hand side you can see there was a train station firstly on the on the ground. It was quite important because the workers surrounding Berlin from the villages came here to work, and it was also really important for materials. I think coal was imported through this train station, and also wood and other food supplies that came to the slowly growing city of Berlin. I think around this time, you can see here, 1920s, 1930s, Berlin had this peak point of population that was about like 4 million. That sound for an Indian city, that's like really small, but for a German city, that's the biggest city we had. So and later, there was no use for this platform anymore because there were other stations going on in Berlin, better import systems, so it was demolished. You can see it in 1980, and when Berlin was divided, as whole Germany was, the park was an exclave of Western or Eastern Berlin, actually, I must say, because the grounds belonged to the GDR. That is because all of the train systems in Berlin were administered by the GDR train company. So that was really interesting because stepping on this ground was actually meaning stepping on the GDR's ground. So they made some contract which said, okay, dear West Berlin, you can have this park if you try to brush it up and give it to the public and make a part out of it. And that was actually happened. But I'm really shortening it here, but because it was a huge process that involved so many engagement of the people who live there and really tried to make this park happen. So, and in 1994, you can see the first playground on the grounds of the former train station of Görlitzer Bahnhof. Now, why is it so interesting to look at the park as an affective space? You can see here there's groups of people that use this this park. I'm just gonna pick some. Of course, animals and plants, because we like to forget these. We only concentrate on the humans, but of course they are part of a network of interaction. Then you can see here party people that are going to chill there, to drink beer, as you can do in Germany in public, and yeah, do all these things. Of course, the police is there because there are, due to the party people that want to buy some drugs, which is illegal in Germany, of course. But there are some drug dealers, of course. But the next, I don't know, next playground next to the drug dealer, there are families playing. There are like tourists taking pictures, and there are also homeless people living in the park. So you have this huge variety of people visiting the park. That is, of course, pretty diverse, and of course also discussed really eagerly in the media. So it's always the question, how can this be a family park if there are drug dealers next to the playground? How can this be a good place for elderly people if there are young people always partying all the time? So that brings me to the theoretical approach I have, and that's mostly combined from two terms. From the relational term of space from Martina Löw, and the affective arrangements from Jan Slaby, which is a philosopher of the Free University of Berlin and also a member of the Collaborative Research Center. So on the right-hand side, you can see a picture, actually a drawing of myself, that of me, which tries to get these concepts together. I can't. You can't see my my mouse, right? Otherwise, I could show you. Okay, never mind. I have to describe them. So the first is the concept of the relational space. So that means we don't understand space as a um, room, for example, or a room that is bordered by, I don't know, walls or anything, but the space is made out of elements or objects that are in relation. So if I'm here in my living room now, and my neighbor is outside, we can have a space when we talk to each other, when we interact. We don't have to be in the same space. Or this seminar is a pretty good example. We interact, we have a digital space where we can exchange. So that is also a space even when we're not in the same area. So, and the second theoretical approach from Jan Slaby is the affective arrangement, term of affective arrangement. And that's a little bit more complicated and more open. It seems to go into the detail, but it's actually quite open. I'm just gonna read you a quote. So affective arrangements are heterogeneous ensembles of diverse materials forming a local layout that operates as a dynamic formation. And that's really important, right? So it comprises persons, things, artifacts, spaces, even discourses, behaviors, and expressions in a really characteristic mode of composition and dynamicness. And that is actually a really good description of the park, because everything like the debates in media, the political debates, the debates among the people that live there, the interactions, that all forms together into this arrangement. So, and of course, when you want to look at the affective space, you need to take the historical context, the urban context, of course, because the park is also in a city that needs to be contextualized. The social and political encounters, of course, that happen within the park and even without, because you can't set the borders that straight, and the act of synthesis. So that is all together to this kind of actor itself, seeing the actor. So, and to make you, I don't know, understand what I'm saying probably a little bit better, I have a short video clip from exhibition Monuments in Motion from Jean Bourgeois, who, was, I think, putting it pretty well with his monuments and Pantheon of Rome in 2017. I'm just gonna play it. You can see here 2 performers on a platform that is only locked in the middle, so they have to balance every movement. And their goal is to sit together at the table. So they have to put every motion, every little movement really precise and parallel to the other person, so that they can sit down together. Just a really short clip. So that's trying to open up the term of space. And now I'm just gonna come back to the current situation, where you can see that it's the International Workers' Day in the park, in the Görlitzer Park. On the 1st of May 2018, you can see a lot of people trying to have a good time. I don't know, you can see a stage in the background, and that was the park on the International Workers' Day this year. So of course, this pandemic does something to affective spaces. And you can see that the shift between being there and having a relation to the object in the park is not that strong anymore. You have to relate to the park from a far distance, but it does still happen. So there are still discourses going on. So, and there you can see that the affective space is not that, is actually a good opportunity to see spaces opening up to the surroundings, to not sit in a strict border. That's my last point. Actually, current situation in Berlin. What are the prospects on affective spaces during the COVID-19 pandemic? On the right side, I saw yesterday on a flagpole that was quite interesting. Someone asked, "What is now possible?" I asked. I think that was relating to the rules in Germany, but that I asked this myself. This is the next space I want to do research on. That is the Alexanderplatz in Berlin. You probably know it. At the left-hand side on the map, you can see the Berlin TV Tower, which is quite famous for Berlin. And there in the middle center, that's the Alexanderplatz. And that place has always been a really interesting historical place, of course, but also an affective space. On the right-hand side, you can see the police blocking the access points to the Alexanderplatz, because a lot of people would gather there. On the right-hand side in the lower bottom corner, you can see this too. So here you have again the historicity of this place, starting from 1989. That was just before the fall of the Berlin Wall. People demonstrated, and there was a momentum going on. People were gathering at this place to express their freedom. In 2018, something similar happened, much smaller, 20,000 people only, but gathered to support the refugee decision of Angela Merkel to take a refugee into Germany. And on 2020, you can see not that organized, but there is a demonstration going on against the hygienic procedures the government is taking, because people feel, of course, threatened in their freedom, of course. So you can see always the historicity of these affective spaces, and yeah, that's the next place I'm trying to engage with this approach. It is hard, of course, to study and to organize interviews, but because I always like to meet the people in the place I'm trying to research, because the affective relation is going on in that very moment. So yes, that is some of my literature. I try to organize it after like languages. English, you can find some here. Deutsch, Himani is here. She can speak German. She can read this for you others too. And yeah, if you have any questions or some ideas, or I don't know, some feedback, or you think I'm wrong, please feel free to contact me. I put my mail in the lower right bottom corner. So thank you very much. That's all from me.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you very much, Max. I think that was a very, very lucid presentation. That actually brought into question the whole idea of urban social spaces, and how urban social spaces, which are generally thought to be free, how they have so many meanings, so many embodied meanings related to these urban spaces, and how the idea of urban space is also going to change. It has already changed how these spaces have already become, even in your pictures we can see International Workers' Day picture. I think that clearly tells you that how the priorities have changed with the current situation. And I think it is only through the idea of intersectionality that we can actually relate to urban spaces, because if we see this order, because when we first approach these urban spaces, they look more or less ordered, but then when we dig deep, when we through ethnographic work, through our daily observation of these spaces, we can actually see how these spaces are relational, how these spaces are affective, and how they are multi-layered, and how they actually tell you the reality of life, how inequalities, how racial prejudices, how gender inequalities are can be situated in these spaces. So wonderful. I think that was a great presentation. With that, now I want to open these two presentations together, because Kritika's presentation and Max's presentation, they had a lot in common in some ways, because both this whole idea of precarity and the neoliberal environment, and also how spaces are shaped by neoliberal environment. So I think we can take up some questions very quickly. We have Dr. Avitoli can correct me. Can we take 10 minutes or less? 5 minutes. Okay. So questions, please. I think somebody has a question. I think, yeah, Surmai Bansal.
Saurabh, can you? Romeo, you're in.
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah.
So my question is with reference to Kritika's presentation. Under current scenario, what is the government of California particularly doing in order to support economic and mental well-being of the domestic workers there in ground reality?
Yeah, so actually, that's part of what the domestic workers movement is trying to achieve here. So in California, in the US, the federal, so the national, there is no national cover for domestic workers. There are no national legal policies that include domestic workers with other workers in terms of rights to minimum wages, etc. But there are statewide like regulations. So in California, the regulations are actually much better than some other states in the US for domestic workers, rights like minimum wages and breaks, etc. But they still do not include the domestic workers under the OSHA, which is like which is a group of laws that support governmental aid in terms of medical, like healthcare and accidental injuries during work, etc. So actually, this COVID-19 crisis has propelled the domestic workers movement here in California to campaign heavily for including domestic workers in these laws in California and nationally in the US. For now, though, if you ask just about California, the governor here in California and the state machinery here has provided this relief fund, which they are actually administering for undocumented workers, because a lot of domestic workers here in California and in the US are also undocumented immigrants. So they're trying to provide like monetary funds to the domestic workers so that they can support themselves and manage the loss of wages due to the COVID crisis. But they haven't really addressed mental health or any other issues because the workers continue to be outside the periphery of the laws that help the other workers in California and in the US in general.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, Kritika. So I have a question which is an extension to Sauramya's question. He talked about domestic workers. I wanted to know what are the steps the university is taking to take care of their students and researchers. What are the concrete plans that you have experienced that university is taking for the well-being of their researchers and students?
Right. So here, like, there is this divide between private and public universities, which is now very evident in times of the crisis of the pandemic. So the universities like mine, which are privately funded, have provided for mental health counseling and other medical testing facilities, etc., for their students, so that the students can it can survive here, especially for the international students. They're providing some testing facilities before they travel to their home countries if they choose to do so during the summer. And they're also discussing a lot about extending funding for an entire semester for the researchers, because people are not able to work this semester. So, but actually those discussions have emerged from student bodies and groups of students bringing these questions to the administration. In public universities in the US, the situation is a little dire because there is a gap in funding resources. So the students are heavily affected by that. And the student bodies and organizations here are actually in process of creating a US-wide movement to talk about increase in student stipends, etc., because they are suffering a lot due to the COVID crisis, but they're expected to graduate within the funds that have been provided to them, which doesn't seem fair. So right now that it's a struggle that's going on here in the universities as well.
Any other questions? Okay, I think Tejinder has a question for Max.
I request Tejinder to please unmute yourself and ask question.
Basically, she wants to ask, did you consider the aspect of physical accessibility and inclusivity of the space? So Max, that is, please read it on your screen. There's a question in the group chat.
Yes, thank you. Okay, never mind. All right. Yeah, I did. Of course, I did. And there's like so many things you have to consider when you see the park as a open and public space. You know, I say open and public because it never is really. For example, it's always quite hard to find women at the night in the park because they are, of course, afraid of some violence or sexual harassment. So, and on the other hand, of course, at the park it was quite like with accessibility. It was actually everyone has access to it, like right from the building of the park. It's quite inclusive, I would say, but of course not everyone is going there, you know, because some people may think it's quite posh and it's like a big city park. People are going there. People don't go there because they have fear of the drug dealers. So there's so many things going on. But yeah, that's a really important thing to consider doing research. But that's included, yeah. Thank you.
So I think there is another question for Kritika. Arun, would you like to ask it yourself, or Kritika? Please, it is on the screen.
Yeah. I read that, sir, but I was wondering, there's another person who would like to ask a question. If they could also ask it, then I could answer it together, maybe.
Yeah, I've asked them to write it here. So you continue with Arun's query.
Yeah, so I think, like, in terms of recommendations, recommendations for working in this condition, I think that it's really beneficial for the university and the departments to produce like democratic online spaces, because now we are bound to working online. So I think it's a great idea for people to come together in these spaces and to share their work in terms of not just like finished pieces, but, you know, have workshops where they can actually discuss their projects, their drafts, and get feedback on how they're designing the project. Because I think that these days, because of the crisis, you really have to improvise on your methods and go in these blind areas where you don't know how to manage, but you have to find new strategies to cope with that. So I really think that collaborative work is the way to go for this, and we should really use internet as a tool to engage people both locally and globally, especially for India. Also, I think this is something that could be really helpful.
Yes, thank you, Kritika. I think we have just 1 minute, and Hemant, if you can ask your question. Hemant wants to ask a question to Kritika.
Good afternoon to everybody. This is Hemant from IIHMR University. Basically, I am working as an assistant professor and I am a student of anthropology from Sambalpur University, Odisha. Just I would like to understand the perspective of psychological counseling through the internet. In the developed country, it may be able to possible that the psychological counseling would be beneficial to the patients. But in context to underdeveloped countries and developing countries, where the literate mass population is not so much high, what the government should do?
Yeah, so I actually was it would be difficult for me to give a recommendation for like an entire population. Like in India, there are different. In my work, for example, my whole argument is that we cannot club all the workers together, and domestic workers are like specific cases which need specific concerns being addressed. So what I meant in terms of mental health support through university systems and through academia was majorly focused on looking at people in academia, because I do realize that, like you said, there are different ways of addressing different problems, which are of course bound by access in terms of technology as well. But so my my idea of talking about mental health and well-being, that's why I was limiting it to graduate students, researchers, and like academics in general. But so I think it would be very difficult for me to answer about recommendations from the government about the other working class people, because I really have no experience of working there. So yeah.
Thank you so much for your answer. But actually the thing is that in country like India, when now the migration populations are moving towards different districts, and it has that the number of cases are continuously increasing, and along with this, due to a longer period of lockdown, now the situation and the mental condition of people are getting very bad.
Right, but see, the migrant, I get your point.
So in a country like India, it is not been possible to address this solution at current times.
No, to just address your query in just like a line, I would seriously say that I wrote my paper for this semester thinking of the migrant workers crisis in India for one of my classes. And I really think that what the migrant workers crisis is showing to all of us right now are the gaping holes in our economic policies that have been there for decades, and the precarity that migrant workers are facing, and the way their work is completely like it's seeped in vulnerability. So I think their basic needs are even not being addressed. So to talk about their mental health and well-being would be like a far stretch. Like they're basically fighting to exist and survive today, to exist on a daily basis. So I really think that that is something that we should look at first. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that stimulating discussion. We have just, I want to combine two questions here. One is by Nandan and another one is by Shivani. So Max, these two are for you. Nandan wants to know whether, so in the US, all the children parks are fenced. So what is the situation in Berlin? And then Shivani wants to know how, and I think you can elaborate more on the idea of phobia and fear in urban spaces. So very quickly, if you can comment on both the questions.
Okay, sure. It was, they've been fenced like for several weeks, but now the cases in Germany, the infection rates are so low that the government has opened up these places again. So playgrounds, everything is open right now. And there was a really short span of time in Berlin where it was like same as you described. You couldn't sit down anywhere. You couldn't read a book. You had to move. You had to be walking or jogging or something. But that's now over, thankfully. I'm not quite sure about a second wave. Probably these procedures will be there again. So yeah, that's the current situation in Berlin. And the second question was, sorry, I need to.
Fear.
Yeah, right. Yes. Of course, that's a really important part, and how you can study that is really a really good question, because it's quite hard to talk to people about the phobias when they are sometimes really irrational, but that's what phobias are. So I developed a kind of participants a workshop when you where you try to get the phobias together and try to not explain them, but express them probably. I did this in my, I showed you in my work on the fear of violence in the Berlin metro system. If you're interested in that, you just can mail me and I can probably not send it to you, it's in German, but translate it or something.
Okay, great. I think it has been a wonderful session so far.